Hey friends, it's me, the Ebony Otaku, the well-rounded nerd. Different kind of video today. So I know I do a lot of the readings from my authors of the Warhammers. Love it so much. I read a lot of adult fiction. Adult historical fiction specifically, by Asian authors like An Chi Min, Lisa C, Amy Tan, all of those, the greats, the goats, that we love so much, and some others in that vein. But I thought, you know what? I should probably, branch out a little bit and do a little reading and book recommendation from other authors for the Utes. Because looking at my channel demographics, there are a few Utes that watch, and there are people who are probably parents of Utes that watch. I know these days it's hard to find media that you would consider appropriate. Every household has a different definition of that, of what is appropriate for their Ute and what is not. But I'm going to bring up some classics from my childhood and then maybe read from one or two of them today. So if you're looking for a recommendation list, and books you can read together, and for those of us who are of a certain age and older, they just bring back good memories. It's fun to read together. But let's examine. So I'm gonna start with books for the older youngins, like your 12 and ups, maybe for some of these 13 or 14. Use your best judgment, parents. I'm just making recommendations. I cannot tell you what is appropriate specifically for you and your child. But these are ones I think as kids get older, and they want a more in-depth story, but they also don't want to be traumatized. These might be good ones. Now this one you're gonna have heard of because there was a movie a few years ago, but you need to read the actual book. It's not a huge one, but that would be Catherine Patterson's Bridge to Terabithia. This one actually got a Newbery Medal, which I'm assuming that's still a big deal. But when books got Newbery Medals, that meant, kids need to read this one back in the day. If you've not read it, it's about a young boy who moves out to the countryside and befriends the barefoot wild girl that lives up the road, and shenanigans ensue. It does have a rather sad ending. Ends with the young girl going tragically. They did that differently in the movie that came out a few years ago. But it's it's a really good read. It's about friendship. It's about children understanding that no matter how much of a misfit or an outsider they might think they are, that there is a community for them somewhere, that all of us have our persons out there somewhere in the world. And it's about two kids becoming friends that had, circumstances not aligned perfectly, that would not have been friends. So I highly recommend this one. This one came out in, oh my goodness, 1979. Whoa. Whoa. It even has my original name tag in it from when I was a kid. Wow. Yeah, I've had this book for a long time. I wasn't alive. Oh, no. No, this was copyrighted in 1977. Yeah, so this story's been around for a long time. A long time. But good stories like this endure because they're just, they're right there. So that's the first one. Remember what the older ones right now. So let's go on to the next book. Now, this is a series. So remember that Number of the Stars? No, not Number of the Stars. Fault in the Stars. Our Fault in the Stars. It was a young adult. Young girls teenagers got the cancer. Meets a boy. It's a whole thing. I've watched the movie, did not read the book, but precursor to that would be this series, 6 Months to Live. And there are several books in this series. There's 6 Months to Live, I Want to Live, No Time to Cry, and a couple of more. But it's about a girl who is diagnosed with leukemia at a very young age. She's like 13 or 14. And she was in the hospital for quite a long time. And then her befriending another patient at the hospital, another girl about her age, and the things that they go through. People who understand, people who don't understand, finding camaraderie in this, wanting to live. One of the drawbacks of youth is you've got your whole life ahead of you. But with your whole life ahead of you, that means foresight's not really a thing until you hit a certain age and you realize you got to get it together. But when something like this happens to a young person, they start thinking and talking and acting in ways that are far beyond their years because they see their life being shortened, and it forces them to grow up in ways that we don't really want our young people to grow up so early. And there's some good, tough conversations that happen in this book, some good perspectives. This is a really good series for helping young people understand that even in their toughest circumstances, there are still friends to be made, and not all of our friends are going to be with us forever. And that's a tough lesson to learn. How do you teach kids that not everybody makes it to adulthood? How do you teach kids that not everyone has an easy life? How do you teach kids those hard things that are hard to talk about? And some people are really good at it. But again, I've said it before, fiction offers us a safety net in talking about hard topics, because now we can talk about it from the perspective of something that really happens to people, but it's about characters that aren't in the real world. So it gives us a little safety in having that conversation. And this series is really good. It's by Lorleen McDaniel, 6 Months to Live, and there's several other books that come after this one. Highly, highly recommend. You can tell this is a very tattered, all my books are tattered, because growing up and reading these, I tore through them. I read this book 15 times growing up, easily. I was always in the book giveaway stack at the library, getting more books. But this was a really interesting find. The next one, though, actually is Number the Stars. So I'm showing you the back of the book because I had this habit for a few years in my childhood. I don't know why, but I would rip the covers off my books. I don't know why, but this was required reading for me when I was in school. Now, let me be clear. When I was in grade school, I went to a private Baptist school. So from kindergarten to 8th grade, I went to the same school for 9 straight years. Had they had a high school, I probably would have gone to that high school. So there were probably some advances in our education that may not have been in other schools that existed in the sector of schooling I was in. But this is a youth book. This book is written to youth, but look at the back of that cover. You can imagine what this is about. The Number of the Stars came to us. When would this one come out? I didn't tell y'all when the last one came out, did I? Need to go look it out. Oh, wow. Copyright 1989, Lois Lowry. Lois Lowry be dropping the hits. Y'all recognize that in The Giver? Yeah, Lois Lowry brought us The Giver. Read the book. I don't know about that movie. Read the book. That's one of those ones that's really hard to film, kind of like Dune. If you've never read the Dune series, it's a hard read for most people. And the way that Lois Lowry wrote The Giver, it feels very Anthem by Ayn Rand. Like it just Ayn Rand. Sorry, mixed up her syllables. But yeah, it feels like that kind of writing. It's a tough read. With this one, this is a tough subject. This is it's a Holocaust book. That's a tough subject to talk to children about because it is part of history. It's a major part of history. What happened during World War II? Like I don't think we can understand how many people perished in that war in the most atrocious ways. Like that war was a free for all. It was redonkulous. I hit a period in my childhood and in my teens where I was doing a lot of World War II research and reading, and I read everything Elie Wiesel wrote, which them books ain't for kids. Although I read Night in 8th grade. Was it 7th or 8th grade? I was like 11 or 12 when I read Night by Elie Wiesel. Yeah, I'm not recommending that one for little kids. But I just couldn't understand why that war had to happen. It just, every time it was explained to me, the background of that war, I just did not get it. Because in my brain, I can't look at another person and think, I'm going to choose to hate you because you're not me. So now you're my enemy. Because I've made you my enemy, you're not human. Because I've decided you're not human, that means I get to treat you however I want. I mean, I just summed up war in a nutshell. When you decide that your enemy isn't human, all of a sudden it becomes real easy to justify a lot of things if they're not human. How do you have those conversations with young people? A book like this is a good way. Number of the Stars is about a 10-year-old girl named Anne-Marie Johansson and her best friend Ellen Rosen, who are just besties in 1943 in Copenhagen. And of course, World War II breaks out. And poor little Ellen, she's the daughter of Jews. Her family's Jewish, and the Johanssons take her in and hide her. She was lucky enough to, when she was a baby, it was her or her sister, I forget, but one of them was born with blonde hair. And there was a scene in this book where they come looking for the little girl, and the hair colors aren't matching. I can't remember exactly the sequence. You have to read it. But the girl that she's pretending to be happened to have the same color hair when she was younger, when she was a baby. And they're like, oh no, we got a baby picture of her, which you can't prove, yay or nay if that's the kid. Like it's just, and the lengths the family goes through to save this child. And the links that you see all kinds of people are going through to save people. As much as it's a story about how atrocious World War II was and how we should never repeat that, this is why you got to learn history. Why do you have to learn history? Because of this. You know what? All you kids at Shiz, this is why you got to learn history, so that you don't repeat it, so that we don't do this again. Because people who don't study history are doomed to repeat it. That's so very true. And if you go back far enough in humanity, you realize that we are just caught in this cycle. Modern humans think we're so far above, so far beyond the things of the past, and we're not. But this is a good fictional account of World War II that is digestible. I would put this one at the 13, 14 and up. You got a mature 12-year-old maybe. But it doesn't, it's dark, but it's not so dark it should keep them up at night. You know what I mean? But it can be a hard read, because it's going to be children reading about children who are taken from their homes, who lose everything, who had stable, secure homes one day, and then the next day they were told they don't live there and that they don't matter. That's tough. That's a tough one. But again, fiction gives us safety and space to talk about hard things. There's one more in the young adult YA category I want to look at, and that's Sounder. Have you read Sounder? This is an old story as well. Where is it? So this one originally was first penned in 1969. A man keeps, like his love, his courage dark. Ooh, well, that's a phrase. But Sounder is the story of a hound dog, a coon dog, a raccoon hunting dog. You may have heard of another one, Where the Red Fern Grows. Similar kind of story. But this is the story of a coon dog, Sounder, and his devotion to his master. It is also the story of humans. The father, a black sharecropper who must steal to feed his children. The timid mother fighting for survival, and the son who grows to maturity through his father's prison term and devotion of Sounder. Adult and mature young readers alike will find in The Boy's Bittersweet Memories a parable for our times. Sounder is worth reading by the young, not so young, and adults. We are urged into participation, a moral questioning, a moral wonder, a heart-wrenching story of the South. These are all the things that were said about the book. Now, I will say this is a tough read because it's about that part of the South. Look, y'all, I'm a Southerner, so I can talk about us, okay? I can talk about the South because I are the South. But it's about a tough period in history, and how people made it through. Because, whether I want to believe certain things happened or didn't happen, I wasn't there, so I can't, for sure say what happened. Again, fiction gives us that window to talk about things. I will say this is probably one of the neater of the books I have. I've only read this one once in my life, so for reasons, it was a tough read for me. It was. Can't imagine why. But like Number the Stars, I imagine if I was of Jewish descent, that would be hard for me to read. It's worth reading. It's totally worth investing in. It's totally worth diving into. It's not a fun book, but it's a book for the heart. It's a book for the soul. And sometimes we need those books for the soul. So this would be my YA recommendations today. And why I'm doing book recommendations, because I felt like it. But let's flip to the other half. What about for the kidlets? What about for the little bitties? Or you know what? Those who are young at heart. Young and young at heart. There we go. You didn't have a childhood if it didn't involve Judy Blume and Beverly Cleary. I'm sorry, it didn't. Let's talk about Judy Blume first, because she wrote like the Ramona Explains It All the Fudge books. Fudge was this bad little kid. Okay, he's just a little kid, little 5, 6 year old boy out doing 5, 6 year old boy shenanigans, and he is the youngest until his mom gets pregnant and has a baby girl, and then he's the middle child, and I don't think he's a bad kid. I think he was used to being the youngest, and then he wasn't. And the Fudge books, his name is Fudge. It's his nickname. But the Fudge books are hilarious. They are so fun in the way that she writes about this little kid, and it makes you just love children. This one was done in 1980. Um, so a little bit we'll go just a little bit from chapter 1. We won't go too far because when I was a kid, I thought this book was super long, but now I'm looking at it, I'm like, man, it's short. I could read this in 20 minutes. So chapter 1. Guess what, Peter? Life was going along okay when my mother and father dropped the news, bam, just like that. We have something wonderful to tell you, Peter, Mom said before dinner. She was slicing carrots into the salad bowl. I grabbed one. What is that? I asked. I figured maybe my father's been made president of the company, or maybe my teacher had phoned saying that even though I didn't get the best grades in the 5th grade, oh, she did the tale of the 4th grade nothing too. Anyway, I am definitely the smartest kid in class. We're going to have a baby, Mom said. We're gonna what? I asked, starting to choke. Dad had to whack me on the back. Tiny pieces of chewed up carrot flew out of my mouth and hit the counter. Mom wiped them up with a sponge. Have a baby, Dad said. You mean you're pregnant? I asked Mom. That's right, she told me, patting her middle. Almost 4 months. 4 months? You've known for 4 months and you didn't tell me? We wanted to be sure, Dad said. It took you 4 months to be sure. I saw the doctor for the second time today, Mom said. The baby's due in February. She reached over and tried to tussle my hair. I ducked and got out of the way before she could touch me. Dad took the lid off the pot of the stove and stirred the stew. Mom went back to slicing carrots. You'd have thought we were discussing the weather. How could you? I shouted. How could you? Isn't one enough? They both stopped and looked at me. I kept right on shouting, another fudge? Just what this family needs. I turned around and stormed down the hall. Fudge, my 4-year-old brother, was in the living room. He was shoving crackers into his mouth and laughing like a loon at Sesame Street on the TV. I looked at him and thought about having to go through it all over again. The kicking, the screaming, and the messes and more, much more. I felt so angry that I kicked the wall. Fudge turned. Hi, Peter, he said. You are the biggest pain ever invented, I yelled. He tossed a handful of crackers at me. I raced to my room and slammed the door so hard my map of the world fell off the wall and landed on my bed. Now, that's not how kids really react to finding out their parents are about to have another baby. I don't know what's more accurate. I imagine when my parents told my brother that I was coming, that might have been how he reacted. Although I am God's greatest gift to humans. But yeah, the Tales of the 4th Grade Nothing, Fudge, Super Fudge, Ramona Explains It All. The Judy Blume books are just so fantastic. These are great reads for the youngins with them. These are good books to read to kids as bedtime books. You know, you're looking for those stories and not quite ready for the Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter yet. Not that those aren't stories you can't read to kids. It's just a lot of big words. I mean, if your 5-year-old's that advanced, I'm proud of you. But if they're not, these are good ones. You feeling the memories? Another one. We'll get to Beverly Cleary in a second. But another one that you need to read. I've had this book forever and read it a few times. Is Tore Up Too. From the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankenweiler. This is such a good little book by E.L. Koningsberg. This is about a couple of children who decide to run away from home to teach their parents a lesson. And they run away to the Metropolis Museum of Art. But then they end up stumbling upon a mystery, and it's all about how these two kids manage to live in this museum undetected, like how they're getting food and everything. It's amazing. Like they're like digging like the coins out the fountain at night and using it in like the machines and stuff to get food and whatnot. They're actually quite clever, and the way this little girl thought through what she was going to do, this one came. Wow, 1973. I know somebody's gonna be like, well, what about security cameras? There weren't none. There was nothing. Wow. Wow, this history. This particular version came out in 1987, so still no security cameras hardly. But it's such a good book. It's such a good read. It's fascinating to see how young people can be so inventive, and it's written in kid language. Now, this is not an instruction manual on how to run away to the museum. Look at me. Don't do that. You're not about to have your Nicolas Cage moment. Don't do that. But it's ingenious too. Like even in the front of the book, it looks like Mrs. Basil E. Frankenweiler signed the book. So and this one's got some illustrations in it. It's not every other page, but every chapter has an illustrated page in it. So this is a good bedtime story, like a chapter a night. Good go to sleep. The last one is the greatest of all from our childhood. Y'all. Beverly Cleary. If you weren't reading Beverly Cleary books, you weren't cool. So the first set of series from her, she wrote multiple series, and so did Judy Blume. Ralph S. Mouse. I loved the Ralph S. Mouse books. This is about a mouse who discovers that he can hop in toy vehicles, make the sound of that vehicle, and the vehicle goes. What is not to love? I remember they did make a little stop motion of Ralph S. Mouse. We watched it at the library when I was a kid. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. But it was the first one in the series, I believe, is The Mouse and the Motorcycle. If you've read that one, yeah. And it is so much fun. And then this mouse and this little boy, there's always a kid, become friends. And it's all about how this kid and this mouse have a bond together because he's got a little mouse friend who drives cars and motorcycles and trains and planes and everything else. Like literally he gets on the motorcycle and it goes. And like if he makes it sound faster, it'll go faster. If he goes slower, the motorcycle goes slower. Genius. Absolute genius. Peak. That is peak literature. And then there's the Henry and Ribsy series. There's Henry Huggins and then his dog Ribsy. Henry Huggins is a little boy who did not have the happiest life. He was unusually happy. In fact, he felt awful most of the time. But he ended up finding this dog who became his very best friend. You might remember it from stories like Benji. That's one of them type stories. Where a boy and his dog. But Ribsy is bad AF. Ribsy on that get back. Ribsy is gonna make you earn it. When did this one come out? I'm so curious. Oh my goodness. Copyright 1950. Wow. They better still be publishing these books and y'all better still be reading them to your kids, okay? These are classics. This is what classic means. But Henry finds like a little piece of his soul to spark back to life. There's something in my eyeball and it's annoying me. When he finds this dog, which is Ribsy. Ribsy's the worst. Ribsy looks like my dog if he had long hair, but my dog is the most precious. He's still at the kennel at the time of filming. Okay. Whatever got my eyeball needs to go. There we go. Got it. Oh, so cute. Look at him. Look at the dog. That's a bad dog. Ribsy that knock over trash cans and then track fleas through your house kind of dog. That's just what he did. And we love him for it. But it's all about boy and his dog. What is better? Again, because there's so many in the series, great bedtime reading. I mean, just the Henry and Ribsy books will give you 6 months of bedtime reads with your kids. But highly recommend those for the younger readers. And there's nothing untoward bad in these books that you shouldn't expose kids to. It's all stuff they're thinking and doing anyway. And I admire writers who can write in a child's voice without being patronizing toward children. That's what's so amazing about these types of authors. Hats off, or little pink berets off, to anyone who has that ability, because writing for children is particularly hard. I think that's why sometimes the kids' movies get harsher criticism than maybe they're due, because, well, it was written for kids, but yeah, kids aren't stupid. Have you met kids? You were a kid. Okay. Not having experience and being unintelligent are very different things. And we should write to children at the level we want them to receive and express. If you baby talk your child, well, you are stunting their ability to communicate at a certain point. I mean, you're going to baby talk a baby, but when they ain't a baby no more, you can gaga goo them and they're 7. They're going to have to talk to more people at some point, right? Yeah. Anywho, that's just me. You raise your perfect little monster exactly the way you want to. But anywho, these are just some books that I thought would be fun to recommend, and I think I might actually do some readings from these. I know I said this video I was going to do more readings. I did one, but these might be fun to get into. They are classics. I think most of them now are in the public domain, and I've got tons more in my little bookshelf over here. But these are the ones that came to mind first. I love words. I love words. I love reading. I love books. A lot of people in my mundane life ask me, why do you have such a great vocabulary? Why are you such a great communicator? It's because of reading. I've been reading a lot, a voracious reader. Now, everybody's not that kind of reader, but reading with and reading to, books on tape, that's a great way to do it, because to expand your vocabulary, expand your ability to thought, reading is the best way to do that. Whether it's fiction, nonfiction, things that are happening in our world today, reading about the past, reading history, it doesn't matter. Reading's reading, because it expands our thoughts, it expands our vocabulary, it expands our ability to understand people that aren't us. And it lets us experience new worlds and new points of view in a safe way. And that's why good fiction is so important. So I hope I sparked joy with classics from your childhood today, and also inspired you with some books that you can bring to the young people in your life. As always, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.